David had been looking forward to New Year's Eve all week, imagining a quiet, cozy night with his wife, Emily, just the two of them celebrating the year's end in their small, warmly lit home. The living room was decorated with soft fairy lights that cast a golden glow over the walls, a modest tree in the corner adorned with simple ornaments, and the scent of fresh pine drifting through the air. Outside, the city was alive with distant fireworks, a muted reminder of the world beyond their little haven. David had prepared a special dinner, setting the table carefully with candles and Emily's favorite dishes, feeling a sense of contentment as he waited for her. Emily finally came down the stairs, radiant in a soft sweater and jeans, her hair casually pinned back, and smiled at him, a smile that always made his heart skip. They shared a warm hug, laughing softly about their plans for the night and recalling small memories from past holidays, feeling the familiar comfort of being together. Just as David was about to pour them both a glass of wine, a sudden knock at the door startled him. Emily frowned in confusion, muttering that she hadn't expected anyone. When she opened the door, David's surprise deepened. Standing there with a polite, slightly apologetic smile was Margaret, Emily's mother, carrying a neatly packed suitcase. "I know it's last minute," she said gently, her voice calm but warm. "My flight got cancelled, and I didn't want to spend the holiday alone. I hope it's okay if I stay with you tonight." David hesitated, caught off guard by the unexpected visit, while Emily bit her lip and looked between them, unsure. After a pause, she nodded, agreeing softly, though a shadow of worry passed over her face. Margaret stepped inside with a cheerful energy, immediately setting down her suitcase and chatting about trivial things to ease the tension. She had a way of speaking that drew attention effortlessly, her laughter light but infectious, and David found himself listening, slightly unnerved by how natural her presence felt, yet trying to push aside the odd flutter of emotion it stirred. They sat down to dinner together, and Margaret shared stories from Emily's childhood, anecdotes David had never heard, tales of holiday adventures, mischief, and quiet moments that painted Emily in a tender, nostalgic light. David felt a mixture of amusement and mild unease as he listened, noticing subtle details about Margaret, her expressive eyes, the gentle gestures she made when speaking, the way she looked at him occasionally with a warmth that made his heart thrum faster. Emily excused herself briefly for a phone call, leaving David and Margaret alone for a few minutes, and the conversation shifted naturally, becoming softer, more personal. She asked him about his life, his memories with Emily before they were married, and he found himself sharing things he had never mentioned aloud, feeling oddly comforted yet strangely vulnerable. Margaret's attention made him feel seen in a way that was both comforting and confusing, stirring emotions he wasn't prepared to face. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and the muffled sounds of fireworks outside reminded him that the world was celebrating, while inside, the atmosphere felt charged with an unusual intimacy. Emily returned from her call, laughing lightly about something on the other end, and hugged him tightly, unaware of the subtle tension that had settled in the room in her absence. Margaret excused herself, claiming she would retire early due to jet lag, but lingered at the doorway just long enough to offer a soft, knowing smile. David watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of relief and lingering unease, realizing that tonight would not be as ordinary as he had imagined. He felt a quiet shift in the energy of the house, a tension beneath the surface, and the thought that Margaret's presence would ripple through the evening lingered in his mind. Emily chatted animatedly about small plans for the new year, decorating cookies, and ideas for celebrations, but David's thoughts kept drifting back to the subtle intensity in Margaret's eyes, the softness of her voice, and the sense that her visit, though innocent, had quietly unsettled the night he had carefully planned. He tried to push the feelings aside, focusing on Emily's laughter, the glow of the candles, the warmth of the wine in his hand, and the sense of a new year beginning, yet the air held a quiet tension, a promise that this night would not end in the simple comfort he had expected. As the evening deepened, laughter and conversation flowed, but David remained acutely aware of the currents beneath the smiles, a delicate, unspoken tension threading through the room, leaving him both captivated and uncertain about what the night might hold. The faint echo of fireworks outside punctuated the soft music, and David, though attempting to focus on Emily, couldn't help but notice how Margaret's presence seemed to hover just beyond the ordinary, touching corners of his mind he hadn't anticipated. As Emily finally suggested they toast the coming year, David raised his glass, trying to focus on the celebration, on the love he felt for his wife, yet a part of him remained on edge, sensing that the night had opened a door to emotions and encounters that he had not foreseen. And just as the countdown began, with the muffled boom of fireworks echoing faintly through the city, David felt a subtle, lingering uncertainty, a quiet tension that promised the evening would carry surprises he could not yet imagine, a night that would begin with warmth and laughter but quietly set the stage for emotional twists that neither he nor Emily could anticipate, leaving the heart racing, the mind curious, and the story of their New Year's Eve only just beginning. After the brief tension of Margaret's arrival, the evening seemed to settle, yet David couldn't shake the strange sense of awareness that hung in the air. Emily had returned from her phone call with a bright smile, chatting easily about the call and sharing the little excitement it brought, while Margaret excused herself to rest, retreating to the guest room with her suitcase neatly placed by the bed. David tried to focus entirely on Emily, on the laughter they shared as they reminisced about small adventures from their early days together, the quiet jokes, the clinking of glasses, the glow of candlelight reflecting softly off the walls. But as the night deepened, Margaret's presence seemed to echo through the house, a subtle reminder that the warmth of the evening carried more than just comfort, it carried complexity. David noticed himself watching Emily closely, seeing the sparkle in her eyes as she laughed, the soft curve of her smile, and yet a part of his mind kept drifting back to the earlier moments with Margaret, the way her voice had seemed to draw him in, warm and gentle, almost hypnotic in its ease. He shook his head, chastising himself for the thought, focusing again on Emily, who had poured them both a glass of wine and was explaining a plan to watch the fireworks from the window. Margaret appeared briefly in the hallway, brushing past with a quiet, graceful presence, exchanging a few polite words with David, and he felt the odd, unshakable awareness of her energy, how easily it lingered in the corners of the room. As they stood by the window, Emily pointing out the distant bursts of light in the city, David found himself sharing more personal stories, little memories he hadn't told her mother before, stories of hopes, dreams, and quiet regrets. Margaret listened attentively, her eyes warm and steady, her occasional soft nods making him feel seen in a way he hadn't expected, and though he tried to push the feeling aside, a subtle tension built in his chest, a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and an odd, emotional closeness. Emily, sensing nothing, laughed and leaned against him lightly, her warmth grounding him, yet the memory of Margaret's glance lingered in his mind, a whisper of something unspoken. The music from the living room played softly, a mix of festive tunes and quiet melodies, the lights casting gentle shadows, the scent of the tree and candles filling the air, creating a cocoon of intimacy that seemed both safe and strangely fragile. David tried to focus entirely on the present, watching Emily's hands as she gestured animatedly while describing a funny story, feeling the love and familiarity they had built over the years, yet Margaret's subtle influence hovered in the background, a quiet presence that made him second-guess the night's simplicity. When Emily excused herself to fetch another blanket, leaving David alone in the living room for a moment, Margaret reappeared, casually leaning against the doorframe with a soft smile. She asked questions about David's work, his hobbies, his thoughts on the year ahead, and he found himself speaking freely, almost uncomfortably so, sharing feelings and fears he had never spoken aloud. Her responses were gentle but thoughtful, her voice a calm anchor, and David realized with a start that the emotional intimacy of the conversation stirred feelings he didn't quite understand. It wasn't romantic in the obvious sense, but it carried an emotional weight, a subtle pull that lingered even after Emily returned, unaware of the depth of the conversation that had taken place. The night pressed on, and the countdown to midnight drew nearer, the muffled sounds of fireworks outside threading through the soft music, punctuating the cozy warmth of the home. Emily suggested they make a toast, pouring sparkling cider into their glasses, and David raised his cup, smiling at her, trying to bury the subtle tension that had built throughout the evening. Margaret, sensing the shift in energy, excused herself for the night once more, but lingered in the doorway just long enough to give David a look that felt oddly meaningful, a mixture of warmth, concern, and something he couldn't quite name. The seconds ticked by with quiet intensity, David feeling the weight of unspoken emotions pressing at the edges of his mind, a mixture of curiosity, unease, and a strange longing for connection he had not anticipated. When Emily finally settled into the living room couch, curling up with a blanket and leaning her head against David's shoulder, he felt the grounding comfort of their love, yet the memory of Margaret's subtle presence refused to fade. The music played softly, the city lights blinked in the distance, and the house was filled with the muted magic of anticipation, the kind that comes with New Year's Eve, when everything feels possible yet fragile. David found himself caught in the duality of the night, the warmth of Emily's laughter, the love he had built over years, and the quiet emotional complexity that Margaret's presence had introduced, a reminder that even moments of joy could carry unexpected tension. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, David sensed that the night was far from over, that the simple comfort he had expected was giving way to a more intricate, emotionally charged experience. The house felt alive with subtle energy, the air thick with anticipation, and David, though trying to focus solely on Emily, could not ignore the lingering feelings stirred by Margaret's earlier attention. He found himself reflecting on human connection, on the way small gestures, subtle words, and quiet glances could shift the balance of emotion in a room, and wondered how much the night might still reveal. When Emily finally suggested they move closer to the window to watch the fireworks, David followed, trying to immerse himself in the love and warmth they shared, but a small part of him remained alert, aware of the undercurrent of tension that had quietly threaded through the evening. The first distant explosions of color in the sky mirrored the flicker of uncertainty in his chest, and though he smiled at Emily, feeling the comfort of her presence, he couldn't shake the strange mix of emotions Margaret's visit had introduced. As the minutes counted down, the house was filled with laughter, soft music, and the aroma of pine and candles, yet David knew that the evening, though outwardly perfect, had quietly shifted, and that the subtle complexity of human emotions could not be easily dismissed. Emily's hand rested in his, the warmth of her touch grounding him, but the memory of Margaret's subtle glance lingered, leaving David aware that the night's story was only beginning, that what seemed simple and ordinary could hold quiet surprises, and that the emotional currents of New Year's Eve were far deeper than he had ever imagined. The city outside roared softly with celebration, the house glowed with soft light, and David felt a mixture of joy, love, curiosity, and unease, knowing that this night, which had begun with laughter and warmth, was already quietly shaping into a memory that would linger, full of emotion, reflection, and subtle tension, leaving him to wonder what the hours ahead might bring. As the night grew deeper and the city outside erupted in distant fireworks, David felt the comforting warmth of Emily beside him slowly pull him towards sleep, the soft glow of the candles and the faint music wrapping the house in a quiet, intimate cocoon. Emily yawned, whispering that she would rest for a moment, and with a gentle smile, she left him in the living room for a few minutes while she adjusted the blankets in their bedroom. David's mind wandered as he sipped the last of his wine, reflecting on the evening, the laughter, the shared memories, and the strange, subtle tension that Margaret's presence had brought. He reminded himself to focus on Emily, to cherish the quiet comfort of the life they had built together, yet a small flicker of unease lingered, an awareness that the night held more complexity than he could immediately understand. Moments later, there was a soft knock at the bedroom door, a sound so gentle it could have been mistaken for the creak of the floorboards. David stepped inside, expecting to find Emily adjusting the sheets or reading quietly, but instead, he froze. Sitting on the edge of the bed, framed by the soft lamplight, was Margaret, her posture calm but her eyes carrying a strange, intense warmth. She smiled gently, her voice barely above a whisper, saying, "I thought I would keep you company for a little while." Emily fell asleep downstairs. Shock rippled through David, a tangle of confusion, hesitation, and curiosity locking him in place. His heart raced, not from attraction in a simple sense, but from the intensity of the moment, the emotional closeness he had never expected from his mother-in-law. Margaret's presence was disarming, her calmness almost hypnotic, and for the first time all evening, David felt the complexity of human connection in a way that made him uncertain of what was appropriate. She reached out to touch his hand lightly, a gesture filled with comfort, concern, and an unspoken understanding, and he found himself responding instinctively, pulled into the intimacy of the moment. David's mind raced as he struggled to reconcile propriety with the emotional closeness, to remind himself that Emily was just downstairs, that this was his mother-in-law, yet feeling an undeniable softness, a quiet longing for comfort that he hadn't realized he was craving. Margaret spoke softly about the past, memories of Emily growing up, small anecdotes filled with warmth and nostalgia, her voice threading through the quiet room, mingling with the faint hum of the city and the residual sounds of fireworks. She laughed softly at a shared joke, and David felt the tension in his chest ease slightly, replaced by a complicated mix of emotions, pity, empathy, curiosity, and the strange thrill of unexpected attention. He realized that it was not about romance in the obvious sense, but about the delicate human desire for closeness, connection, and understanding, and how those needs could emerge in unusual circumstances. Margaret noticed his unease and gently reassured him, her words careful, soft, and deliberate, acknowledging the oddity of the situation without forcing it into anything uncomfortable. She explained that Emily had truly fallen asleep after the phone call and that she had simply stayed in the room to make sure David wasn't lonely or uneasy, that she had wanted to offer support in a quiet, caring way. David nodded, trying to steady his racing thoughts, feeling the warmth of her hand and the softness of her gaze, a presence that was comforting yet strange, stirring emotions he didn't yet fully understand. He kept his voice steady as he spoke, expressing appreciation for her thoughtfulness, though internally, he wrestled with the intensity of the moment, the way Margaret's calm, warm demeanor had opened a space in his mind he hadn't anticipated. The clock ticked slowly, the room quiet except for the faint hum of distant celebration, and David found himself thinking about the complexities of human emotion, the subtle ways relationships could shift in moments of vulnerability, and how comfort and connection could take forms he hadn't considered. Margaret's presence seemed to fill the room with a delicate tension, not threatening or harmful, but undeniably potent, a quiet reminder of the thin lines between care, intimacy, and emotional closeness. She shared stories about Emily's childhood, details that painted her in a tender light, and David listened, enraptured not by the stories alone, but by the careful, empathetic way Margaret told them, how her voice carried meaning, warmth, and a subtle, unspoken understanding of him as both Emily's husband and as a man navigating complex emotions. He realized in that moment how rare it was to feel truly seen, understood, and supported in silence, and how that awareness could stir the heart unexpectedly. Margaret reached out again, brushing his arm lightly as she mentioned how proud she was of Emily and, by extension, of him, and David felt a strange comfort in the gesture, a reassurance that went beyond words. Though nothing inappropriate occurred, the night had shifted from ordinary to emotionally charged, a subtle dance of trust, vulnerability, and human connection that left David both unsettled and quietly moved. He thought about Emily, about their love, and how precious it was, and yet he also recognized the profound complexity of family, the unexpected ways intimacy and care could emerge, and how one could feel deeply moved by someone's quiet presence without crossing any boundaries. The moments stretched on, soft, careful, and charged with emotion, until the faint laughter of Emily drifting up from the living room reminded David that the night was far from over, that this delicate encounter had already reshaped his awareness of love, connection, and subtle emotional tension. Margaret's eyes held his for a final moment, full of warmth, understanding, and a gentle sadness, as if acknowledging the strange, fleeting nature of these intimate human moments, and David realized that he would carry the memory of this encounter quietly in his heart, a mixture of emotion, reflection, and the bittersweet awareness of how connection could appear in the most unexpected ways. She left the room slowly, her footsteps soft against the floor, and David sank onto the bed, heart pounding, mind racing, thinking about the fragility of the moment, the strange intimacy of just being seen, and the silent promise of emotions unspoken, lingering, waiting, shaping the night in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. Alone at last, David breathed deeply, feeling the weight and the beauty of the night pressing in, realizing that New Year's Eve had become a night of unexpected emotional revelation, a quiet journey through trust, care, longing, and subtle connection, leaving him awake, thoughtful, and profoundly moved by the human capacity for feeling, reflection, and the gentle, intricate currents of the heart that can sweep in when least expected, a night destined to linger in memory far beyond the fleeting moments of celebration outside. Morning light streamed softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the bedroom where David slowly awoke, the events of the night before replaying in his mind with a mix of clarity and confusion, the emotional tension lingering like a quiet shadow that refused to fade. He lay still for a moment, letting the sunlight fill his awareness, feeling the residual warmth of the house and the faint echo of Margaret's gentle presence from the night before, the memory of her soft voice, her empathetic gaze, and the subtle, comforting gestures that had left him unexpectedly moved. As he rose and stretched, David noticed a small note placed neatly on the nightstand, the handwriting elegant and familiar, and his heart skipped slightly before he realized it was from Margaret. The note read simply, "Thank you for letting me stay. I hope your new year is full of love and happiness. Margaret." He held it for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude, relief, and lingering emotional complexity, understanding that her presence had been meant with care, yet had left him quietly unsettled in a way he hadn't anticipated. David set the note down and moved to the kitchen, where he found Emily bustling with energy, a bright smile on her face as she prepared coffee and breakfast, completely unaware of the quiet intensity of the night that had unfolded while she slept. She greeted him warmly, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that felt both grounding and familiar, and David returned the embrace with a soft smile, choosing to focus on the comfort and love of their marriage rather than the fleeting tension of the night. As they sat together at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee and laughing lightly about the fireworks from the previous evening, David felt the contrast between the ordinary joys of the morning and the emotionally charged moments he had shared with Margaret, realizing how life could weave subtle, complicated threads between relationships without disrupting the larger tapestry of love and trust. The house was quiet except for their conversation and the soft hum of the city outside, the sun climbing higher and bathing the room in a golden light that seemed to cleanse the emotional residue of the previous night, leaving clarity and reflection in its wake. David thought about how Margaret's visit had reminded him of the fragile, complex nature of human emotion, how moments of care, empathy, and quiet attention could stir feelings that were not dangerous but profoundly moving, and how awareness of these subtle dynamics could deepen his appreciation for Emily and the life they shared. As breakfast progressed, they discussed small plans for the day, errands, and ideas for the new year, their laughter filling the kitchen, yet David carried a quiet awareness of the delicate lessons from the night, the importance of communication, the power of empathy, and the way human connections could surface unexpectedly in moments of vulnerability. The house smelled faintly of coffee and baked bread, sunlight dancing on the walls, and David found himself reflecting on the intricacies of relationships, the quiet ways that love, care, and family intertwine, and how moments of tension or emotional intensity need not undermine bonds, but can instead offer insight, empathy, and growth. He remembered the warmth in Margaret's eyes, the care in her voice, and the gentle reassurance of her presence, understanding that the night had been about more than proximity. It had been about the human need to feel understood, supported, and seen, even in unusual circumstances, and he felt a deep appreciation for the emotional honesty that had passed between them in silence. Emily reached for his hand, her touch grounding him in the present, and David realized that this was the anchor that mattered most, the love they shared, the trust they had built, and the everyday moments that reinforced it. The note from Margaret remained on the table, a quiet reminder of the night's unexpected lessons, and David smiled faintly, tucking it safely into a drawer for reflection, not embarrassment, knowing that the events had been handled with care, maturity, and the intention of kindness, leaving him with memories that were meaningful, delicate, and emotionally rich. As the morning progressed, David and Emily moved about the house together, tidying up, sharing small jokes, and exchanging quiet glances that spoke of intimacy, trust, and mutual understanding, and in those moments, David felt a renewed sense of gratitude for their partnership, recognizing how the complexities of human connection could enhance appreciation for the love already present in his life. He thought about the subtle tension, the quiet emotional charge of the night before, and how it had not threatened but deepened his understanding of relationships, reminding him that feelings of longing, empathy, and care could appear unexpectedly, prompting reflection, self-awareness, and emotional growth. The sun rose fully, flooding the home with light, and David felt the weight of last night's experience settling into a gentle understanding, the fragile currents of emotion now transformed into quiet insight, awareness, and renewed affection for Emily. Breakfast plates cleared, coffee finished, and as Emily moved to start the day's errands, David lingered for a moment, holding the warmth of their shared love, the lingering emotional intensity of the previous night, and the lessons it had offered about human care, connection, and the quiet ways emotions could touch the heart. He understood that Margaret's visit had been fleeting but meaningful, a gentle reminder of empathy, compassion, and the subtle bonds that link people, and he resolved to carry that awareness into the new year, cherishing his marriage while recognizing the importance of sensitivity, respect, and emotional honesty. David glanced at the city beyond the window, sunlight reflecting off buildings, streets humming with life, and felt a sense of peace despite the complexity of the prior night. The fireworks and celebration had passed, leaving only clarity, reflection, and the quiet beauty of ordinary life enriched by subtle emotional awareness. He watched Emily smiling in the kitchen, busy yet radiant, and felt a renewed commitment to their love, an appreciation for the unpredictable nuances of family and human connection, and a gentle recognition that life's emotional moments, even when surprising, could deepen bonds, teach empathy, and leave memories that lingered long after the immediate events faded. In that moment, David realized that New Year's Eve had not just marked the passage of time, but had offered him insight into love, intimacy, trust, and the fragile beauty of human emotions, leaving him ready to embrace the year ahead with mindfulness, gratitude, and a deeper understanding of the delicate currents that shape relationships, making him cherish Emily, their life together, and the unexpected lessons that sometimes arrive quietly, in the spaces between ordinary moments, transforming them into experiences of lasting emotional richness, reflection, and heartfelt connection that would stay with him far beyond the dawn of the new day.